Hello, everyone. So good to wish you all or welcome you all into the new year. So as Brittany shared, I'm going to be talking about the work that I've been doing as the director of a new center in the College of Education at Illinois State University. And I really want to reiterate what Brittany was saying with regard to this being a thinking space, a dialogue. I am new into thinking about student engagement myself. And so I really want to invite this conversation around like what are the things that we're thinking about? What are the things that we're aware of with what's happening in higher education with students and student engagement? What are we hoping for? What are the kind of barriers that we're running into? And then what are some of the strategies or solutions that we're coming up with? And then, this being an iterative process, and what are we continuing to think about? So with that being said, I'm going to start us off with a land acknowledgement statement. So this is the land acknowledgement statement from Illinois State University. Illinois State University was built on the land of multiple Native nations. These lands were the traditional birthright of Indigenous people who were forcibly removed and have faced centuries of struggle for survival and identity in the wake of dispossession and displacement. We'd like to acknowledge that our campus sits on the lands that were once home to the Illini, Peoria, and the Maiamia, and later, due to colonial encroachment, the displacement of the Fox, Potawatomi, Sauk, Shawnee, Winnebago, Iowa, Mascoutin, Pikanashaw, Wiaya, and Kickapoo nations. We also express honor to those Indigenous people whom we may have excluded in this acknowledgement due to erasure and historical inaccuracy. And we want to thank the members of the ISU Native American Studies program, the Department of History, Department of Sociology, Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies, and the Multicultural Center for sharing their land acknowledgement statements, which were used to develop this statement. And so I always start any talk that I give with a land acknowledgement statement, but being somebody who works in a student success center, I think especially as we're thinking about how to engage students, representation and acknowledgement matters to our students. And even on our own campus, having this land acknowledgement statement has generated further conversations around how we support and engage our Indigenous students. And it's also welcomed feedback around, what does it mean to have a land acknowledgement statement, and how does that inform the work that we're doing and that we're projecting to do to engage particular populations on our campus that we would like to see enrollment increase in those populations and engagement increase. So I want to start us off. So this is a community here gathering to talk and dialogue and think together. So I would like to begin that dialogue with just introductions in the chat. And so if you could please share your name, your pronouns, if you share pronouns, institution that you're coming from, and your role at your institution. So my name again is Becky Butcher. I'm she, her. I'm at ISU, and I'm the director of the Efaw Center. Hi, Myra from Community College, mental health counselor. Hello, Vicki. And yes, if you prefer to unmute rather than go into chat, go for it. Hi, Kathy. Hello, Christina. Hello, Devin. Hello, Sonia. Hello, Vicki. All right, so please feel free to continue to introduce yourselves. And I'm gonna in the chat, and I'm gonna move next to our community agreement. So again, I'm hoping that we will continue to have dialogue in the chat. We're gonna also do a couple of breakout rooms. And so I think it's important that we have some agreements for our conversation and dialogue with one another. So I'd like to invite us to all listen with an open mind and open ears. So like we're really listening to hear from one another, to learn from one another. We're listening with non-judgment, and that's really important because it acknowledges that we're all coming from different positions, coming from different roles. And so the way that somebody may have gone about something, or we might share vulnerable things about struggles that we're experiencing. And so we want to create a space and a container for this conversation where we're welcoming that kind of vulnerability of sharing, because that's going to enable us to think together. And so in that spirit, I also would love to invite us to ask questions, our own questions that we might have, but also questions of one another, to help us to think through our approaches to student engagement. Also, as we're doing this, make sure to take care of your own needs. And so, just notice what's happening in your body in this next hour. I double as a yoga teacher, so I can't ever put that outside of my mind. So, the self-care piece is always really important. Maybe that's looking off the screen, maybe that's standing up if you feel yourself kind of falling asleep. But then also I ask you to please, for about the next hour, just committing to staying present and participating. And so our cell phones are major distractions. And so if you're able to put your phone down and turn it over, if you're able to, restrain from looking at email or working on other things, that will really maximize your experience. But again, taking care of your own needs, which include professional needs. So I'm going to leave that to you all as professionals around what that means to you. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add or modify about our community agreements? And then if I could just get some kind of an acknowledgement, like a thumbs up with your Zoom thumb, or if your video's on, your own thumb, to just consent to these community agreements. Thanks, Myra. Thanks, Vicki. Oh, it's a cool new feature in Zoom, the thumb going totally up. Thanks, Devin. Thanks, William. Thanks, Mariah. Thanks, Jeannie. Thanks, Lisa. All right, wonderful. All right, well, I'm not detecting any protests, so I'm going to assume that if I didn't see your thumb, you are also consenting. All right, so getting to our purpose. So we are going to have opportunity to share examples of student engagement and activities. I'm going to talk about work that I've been doing in the Efaw Center, identify areas of need. So I'll model that. We'll have opportunities towards the second part of this presentation to think about problem solving, questions, barriers that have come up for us, and then spend some time generating ideas about what student engagement can look like on your campus. And I'm going to share some quotations throughout this presentation, and everything's coming from a recent Chronicle of Higher Education report that came out. It's a 2022 publication, but it just came across my desk in the past, I believe, week. And so I'll share the reference for that at the end of this presentation. And if you do have the resources to access Chronicle of Higher Ed reports, it's a useful one for thinking through student engagement. But I just wanted to share that's the resource for where the quotes are coming from in this presentation, and a lot of the kind of research backing for what I'm going to talk about. Okay, so general education, higher education student needs, in terms of what I've read and what I've noticed, fall within these categories. And so peer connection, particularly after the pandemic, with students being isolated and disconnected from one another, whether that was when they were in higher ed or as students, or whether it was when they were in their secondary education classes, that people are feeling more anxious about getting together now with other people. And there was already high levels of anxiety and depression amongst this population, but it's just increased for our students. And so yet there's still this desire for connectedness amongst students. Academic support is a need of our students. And so support from professors, from faculty, and also additional support through tutoring. Financial aid. A lot of our students are experiencing housing insecurity, food insecurity. Textbooks continue to rise, the cost of textbooks. And so we're just having more and more students for whom who are college going, accessing higher education, but then when they get to us, they are in great financial need. Housing, so I mentioned having large populations of on-house populations, students living out of their cars. Mental health is a large area of need. I'm glad that we have some counselors on this call. I'm sure you know this well, how our counseling centers are just booked up and just being accessed beyond capacity. And again, that's directly correlated with the consequences of the trauma, the collective trauma caused by the pandemic, but mental health was already a need for many of our students. Resource access is also a need. I think our students get to our campuses and there can sometimes be an overload of information, and we might have all these resources on our campus, but they might be disparate and students don't necessarily know how to navigate those resources. And I think we're seeing a greater need for flexibility and a calling for the administration, for the staff or the faculty to offer flexibility to our students, but sometimes there can be a tension there that we have this set structure that we expect our students to kind of fit into and navigate while they're kind of demanding and requiring flexibility on our parts. Anything else that any of the y'all are experts in this room that you would add to this list of needs that you're perceiving your students having that's not already on this list? So a big issue, so this is from Myra, that we struggle with is all of our faculty are not representative of the diversity of our students. We struggle with this. How do others address diversity issues to help students feel represented and recognized? Yes, thank you for this important question and statement. Compassion overall. Does anyone have thoughts? Amira's presenting our community with a question about how your institution has addressed any disparities between the identities of the faculty, between the identities of the faculty and the identities of the students. I can talk about some things that I've seen happening at ISU, but I'm wondering, Myra, are there things that you're seeing at your institution, like efforts that have been made to address that disparity?
Yeah, hi, thanks. So we have brought the issue up and we are talking some about where we reach out to try to recruit faculty and staff. So talking about things like historically Black colleges and universities. We've been talking about, we have a book study about diversity and inclusion, but I mean, we've also talked about changing the ways that we talk about hiring. So like when we talk about we've removed the language of preferred characteristics or qualifications because we felt like that might be a barrier because people read it as required instead of preferred.
Mhm.
But yeah, we don't have a lot of good answers about it.
Do you have search advocates at your institution? Or have you talked about having search advocates, like an outside, like somebody who's outside of the department or the hiring unit, who's there to hold everyone accountable to examining bias?
Yeah, we have equal employment opportunity representation on the searches.
Mhm.
We've been discussing the possibility of making that position a voting member of the committees, the search committees. There's some concerns about that from some areas. I personally think that it would be valuable, but there are a lot of different perspectives on that. And I
Sure.
don't know what other institutions do with that. But so I would say that's the position that's expected to provide some of that accountability.
Mhm. And then do you have you all discussed having diversity statements as a component of what applicants submit?
That I do not know. But that's a good question. Diversity statements. Sorry, I'm taking notes while
Mhm.
talking to you. And the other thing that we don't have is we don't have a specific position on the college campus that is reserved for promotion of diversity and inclusion,
Mhm.
like a director of diversity and inclusion or anything like that. We have a new president who's bringing up the issue, so that may change. But right now, we don't have like an individual whose job it is to make sure, whose only job it is to make sure that that happens.
Mhm. Mhm. Christine, I see you mentioned some, it looks like very successful efforts that you've had on your campus, Black Hawk College. Would you be able to speak to what that's looked like and what you think has led to that success?
I think is her name Maria, who just commented on, we do have a director of diversity and inclusion. And so of course, I think that that person, spearheads making these changes. So that's probably why that's my guess.
Mhm. Yeah, and so maybe having examples, ISU within the College of Education, we have a equity and diversity officer. And so maybe even, I guess, having examples of other institutions, perhaps when you're in these conversations with others, perhaps could help, support making that argument for that line. I was faculty before I stepped into this director position, and you run into, there's a challenge with like academic freedom, and so there needs to be, faculty have to have a willingness to educate themselves, to diversify their curriculum. But I think that if you can get department heads, so department chairs and directors on board with using faculty meeting time to do audits of curriculum, to just raise awareness. And within the College of Education, we are having to do audits anyway because of legislation related to culturally responsive teaching and leading standards. And so for us, that's provided an opportunity to kind of systematically look across all of our syllabi that are kind of the representative syllabi for each course, and looking at like whose voices are represented in our text and in our textbook, like who are the authors that we're upholding, which are going to then inform the conversations to an extent in the classroom. And something else that we're doing that is a partnership between myself and the diversity and equity officer and our marketing team is looking at the materials around our college, and who the ideas and the representation of the visibility of the texts. And that came out of holding listening circles with students around, specifically, we had some incidents on campus related to harassment of LGBTQ students. And so then that inspired us to hold space for faculty, staff, students to come together to talk about what are your experiences on campus and what would you like to see changed. And so I think that listening circles can also be a powerful avenue to just kind of getting, or focus groups, to getting information from the community, to then be able to bring to administration and say, look, this is what our constituents are saying, and then how can we make these changes? And so I think in that regard, you know, as you're working to diversify your faculty and staff, you can also think about, well, you know, even as a white woman, like what can I do in terms of like the imagery that I have around my office, and the text that I'm putting in front of students, the voices, so that students see themselves reflected in the materials that we're using to teach our content. Anything else that you see as needs? Compassion, I appreciate putting that one there. Okay, well, we're going to move next into thinking a little bit more about our contexts. And so in a moment, Brittany's going to put us into breakout rooms, just 2 or 3 of us. And the question here is, what amongst these quotes resonates with your student population? And I just put a handout in the chat that has these quotes so that you don't have to worry about this slide going away in your breakout training. And before we go into our small breakout room to discuss these quotes, Kathleen just shared that at her school, looks like you got an Association of Colleges and Universities for certification training for faculty on diversity and teaching practices. That's awesome. Kathleen, is there anything you wanted to say about that?
No, not especially. We are experiencing the same that others are reporting in terms of just statistically, you know, low representation in terms of people of color with the faculty.
Mm-hmm. I will say and I'm by no means an expert in belongingness literature, but I was looking at some belongingness literature, and I saw that that there was one study that was talking about how students of color tend to feel a greater sense of belonging in community colleges, and that's contrasts with four-year colleges. And so I think that was an important difference that I was noticing in the literature. All right, Brittany, are you ready to move us into our breakout rooms?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so we'll just be in here for like 3 or 4 minutes and just pick a quote that stands out to you, and discuss what resonates with your student population.
Yep.
Any questions before we go into the breakout room? All right, Brittany, please release us. Thank you. All right, hello, welcome back, everyone. Okay, so I'd love to invite any sharing out of a quote that you discussed in your group and what you talked about.
So I'll just jump into the fray.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I mentioned was that so the quote was about the students who want to hide or slip under the radar, or my thinking is actually they don't want to hide or slip under the radar, but they fall off the radar.
Mm.
But one thing that we've just done here at Parkland fairly recently is we've changed our advising model so that the students get assigned a specific advisor when they first get here. It's based on their area of academic interest. And then that advisor is also sort of has a closer relationship with the area of academic interest, the faculty in that area. So the idea is that they have a stronger relationship and can then help the students have a stronger relationship with their departments.
Mm-hmm.
They also have an expectation that they will have some kind of contact with the student at least 3 times in the semester. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure, that's been a relatively new change, so I'm not sure how that's happening or how that's going. But it seems like that could be really helpful in terms of students not falling off, or at least that they have to put more effort into not responding than they might otherwise do. So I was curious about whether other schools have that kind of a model.
Mhm. Does anyone else on this call have that kind of a model where you're matching students with, it sounds like a faculty and an advisor? Yeah, I only see something similar to that, like with certain populations of students, with being assigned, I think maybe to like having an advisor with like a smaller cohort of students, so like in athletics or if they're in the trio program. I see Sonia says at Starfish, we use Starfish as an early intervention tool for students who are struggling with their classes. They don't fall through the cracks. Sonia, would you mind telling us a little bit about Starfish?
Hi, I'm sorry, I had trouble unmuting.
Grace?
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm actually pretty new to Starfish and fairly new to SIC. I've been here less than a year, but I just got trained on how to use it as well. As an instructor, I used to raise a flag if some of my students were struggling with exams or maybe not turning in their assignments or just any kind of problem, I would raise a flag in there. So the advisors could reach out to them and figure out, hey, what's going on, and establish that relationship with them. So we all kind of work together to make sure that students don't fall through the cracks and that they stay in their classes and actually, try to help them do well. So now I'm on the other side of things. I'm actually not teaching a class this semester, but I'm helping out more with the starfish flags that get assigned to me. So for example, yesterday, I reached out to a couple students because they haven't been attending already. And this is our first week back of class. So I talked to one on the phone and asked her, if there's anything I can do to help, just to not approach it as, hey, you're in trouble, but I'm here as a resource to help you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's gone over really well. Starfish is a great tool from my experience so far.
And so is this a software program?
It is. Yep.
Thank you. So yeah, like a lot of these quotes are, and these are from the higher education articles, so from kind of larger survey data that are kind of illuminating what students are struggling with. And a theme that I'm seeing here is that it's students struggle, but then they don't necessarily reach out for help. And so that what both of you are sharing with like the outreach piece, like reaching out directly to students, as well as a networking component, are two pieces that I think are pretty critical for supporting students. And that's resonates with work that I've been trying to do also in the Efaw Center. So these are a few quotes that also just kind of resonated with thinking about, okay, then what do we do? So we know that these are the needs. We know that students are not reaching out for support, yet they need support. And so when we think about creating the sense of belonging for students, a part of that is thinking about where can we design spaces intentionally so that students have the opportunities to have conversations with one another, to hear each other's different perspectives, and through that to get that sense of community and that peer connection, but also understanding that they're not alone in having this experience. And that's a really, I think, key component with a lot of the mental health challenges that we're seeing people experiencing is like this profound sense of loneliness. And so designing these opportunities for students to engage through connection can help to address that. So I see in the chat, another issue with engagement we struggle with is that most of our students work, and so they can only come to campus for class and they don't stay. Yes. So we have our masters in teaching students are also in that situation. So I've been also trying to kind of wrap my mind around that as well. And so to me, this upcoming semester, I'm going to be playing around more with online communities, and also creating like hubs within our learning management system for students to access resources. And then also I have a lot of Zoom meetings with students in the evenings. And so it's also, shifting like what the workday looks like around when students are actually available. So I appreciate you pointing out that barrier. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the work that I've been doing in the Efaw Center. And again, I want to contextualize this by saying I've been in this role since July. And so for me, I've been thinking about, okay, how do I get students engaged? And also like who's my audience? And then how do I leverage these components of student engagement, and also like what are my challenges that I'm working to address? So this is our mission statement. And so we provide individualized attention, focused learning communities, and special event programming for all teacher education students. So we have a pretty broad audience. This spans from folks who are studying to be early childhood educators all the way through school administration. So we have undergraduate students, we have graduate students, and then also our secondary programs don't major in education, they major in their content area. And so we also have 28 different majors across campus that we're working with, in addition to the elementary, early childhood, and middle level. So our success services focus on academic assistance and enrichment, peer connections and community building, and referrals with follow-up to existing campus resources. And we also acknowledge that the barriers to academic success can be addressed through proactively offering a holistic approach to support services. And so that's where we also think about the mental wellness component of academic success. We also work with our equity, diversity, and inclusion officer, as well as with faculty and staff and students across campus. And eventually we will be expanding to support alum in their first year. So quite a charge here we have in the Efaw Center. So some challenges that I've been thinking about as I've been designing our support services are when students think about, so for some students, like it's a barrier to even ask for help. And so I wanted to very intentionally work to destigmatize this idea of coming to a place that has all these supports, and destigmatize like any negative connotations around seeking support. I also know that this takes a village. And so for me, being new in this role, I wanted to think about what's the work that's already happening across campus, and how can I network with these folks so that also we can be efficient in the work that we're doing. There's also a marketing component, so getting the word out so that students even know that we exist so that they can access our services. I also have 100% student staff. And so thinking about how to create sustainable systems when I have very high turnover, because I'm employing students who graduate, and also identifying areas of need. And so there's a whole piece around like who has access to the data, what's the data that I need to have access to, as well as a component of securely storing data. So those are some big kind of picture things I've been thinking about. So this is the strategy that I took in this past fall, and then I'm continuing on into the spring. So I had a lot of meetings with folks across campus, and I wanted to make sure to touch base with folks in academic affairs as well as in student affairs. And the report, the Chronicle of Higher Ed report says that, we need to understand how to work across these two divisions that are serving students. And that also speaks to the needs, the diverse needs that students have. In order to address the destigmatizing, getting support, I wanted to offer a series, and we ended up offering a series that promoted high impact practices. So I invited folks from the Center for Civic Engagement, from Study Abroad, as well as from academic and student affairs, student counseling, health promotion and wellness, career services, and financial aid, to come and give presentations in the Efaw Center to students, because those are the liaison kind of services that we provide to connect students. So I've developed relationships with people in these different divisions so that I can connect students directly and that my staff can directly connect students with these folks. But I also wanted to promote the visibility of those relationships by asking them to come to our space and give presentations to the students. We also developed one-on-one support services. So our case management system is called Mindful Mentoring. So we have both mindful mentoring, and I developed a relationship with the School of Social Work, and also with counseling to work to hire MSW students and counseling students to serve in these roles, to work one-on-one with students. And then I also have developed a training for our undergraduate students to work as peer academic liaisons, where they do kind of academic coaching kinds of things that are really goal-oriented. So they ask questions about, like, what are your goals as a teacher education student? What are things that you've done in the past that have led to your success? What are the barriers that you're experiencing? What do you want to prioritize? And then developing a plan of action, and then having a regular meeting time. And then I also collaborated with the graduate school as well as the Office of International Engagement to design a graduate writing fellows program to offer writing support to our graduate students. We also created a database of resources that promote culturally responsive teaching practices. And we're also creating online modules. So thinking about students who are working, who leave campus, but who have like a resource need. So one of our major barriers is the content test for teacher education students. A lot of our students pass it, no problem, but then we've got a group of students every semester who don't pass it and have to take it multiple times, and then that becomes a financial barrier. And so we've got a lot of resources across campus, but students don't necessarily know about them or know how to access them. And so we're curating those resources, bringing them into one place in our LMS, and then creating opportunities like events where students can come and they can take the practice test, and then we'll have learning communities following taking that practice test where they can come together and study for the test. So we're creating these kind of intentional peer-to-peer connections. And then I did a lot of research on software for managing data sensitively. And so I ended up choosing Titanium, but there's another one, Academia, that's also people spoke very highly of, particularly if you're running a tutoring center. So this was the strategy. The network that I developed included folks on this slide. So this is not an exhaustive list, but these are a lot of the key people that I met with, talked to them about this is what the Efaw Center is, this is what we do. And if you've got teacher education students, please know that, we want to have a relationship with you to work with those students. So I want to share a case study of a student that we have been working with, because this student, I think, illustrates the benefit of having this network for supporting this student. And this is a pseudonym, and I try to be vague in some of the identifiers to protect the students, to protect the student. So we have on our website a button that connects to a Qualtrics survey for referrals. And so a faculty referred Gabriel to the Efaw Center in October of 22. Gabriel identifies as male, a student of color, a transfer student, and somebody coming from a different region of the state. And so there was coming into a new cultural context. And ISU is a predominantly white institution. And so multiple layers of new cultural context, being a transfer student as well. The faculty referred Gabriel because he wasn't showing up consistently to class, and the professor felt that Gabriel could benefit from support and organization and prioritization. And so that's kind of what looked like from the professor's vantage point. These are the skills that need to be developed. But when I began meeting with Gabriel, it became clear that there were these factors outside outside of his control that were creating barriers for him to be able to show up to class and prioritize in class. And so we did things like navigating a complex bus schedule. Where he lived and grew up, the bus schedule looked very different. It was a literacy practice that we facilitated in how to interpret this new bus schedule. He had housing insecurity that the professor was not aware of, nor had the resources to address. So we were able to get him connected with resources across campus that have emergency funds for students with housing insecurity. And we were able to support him as an advocate to think through his communication with his professors. So in this upcoming semester, now we're ready to start working on the academic support piece. Now that we've kind of helped Gabriel get access to resources to address some of these living needs. So Gabriel will now work with a peer academic liaison in the Efaw Center, and Gabriel will also take classes at a local community college. And I have a relationship with the tutoring center at that community college. And so I've already reached out to make sure that they're going to have tutors for the courses that Gabriel needs to take. So there were some really critical partnerships in making sure that we have the support for Gabriel in place to be able to do this work. And so these are what I'm seeing as our current results. So that's an example of what I experienced. And so now to give you some time to kind of think through how you might take an approach to just doing some planning around working with your population. We're going to move into breakout rooms for about the next 7 minutes to just think through these 6 questions, and then we'll come back at the end to do any sharing out from what came through in your conversations. All right, welcome back, everyone. So I would just like to invite a representative from each breakout room. So we had 3 breakout rooms, and it doesn't just have to be the representative, but if we could at least hear from each breakout room, kind of where your discussion went, and then open it up for just general conversation around anything that you want to discuss as we have this learning community here and we're thinking together about student engagement. So we'll just go in numerical order. So breakout room 1, if you all picked a representative or if somebody would be willing to share out.
I don't remember what breakout room number I was in, but I'm happy to share for our group.
Thanks, Christina. So if you are in 1, so that's
Oh.
wonderful. So I think that you all might be able to see if you click back on, let's see, on the breakout rooms. They're just not assigned, or so room 1 is Christina, Davinia, Jeannie, and Sonia, and then room 2 was Deanna, Kathleen, Maria, and Dean. Room 3 was Dia, Mariah, Stephanie, and William.
If the group's okay with me sharing, I'll try to capture what people shared. I believe most of us in our breakout rooms are at community colleges. So some of the challenges we talked about were students, having to work in addition to trying to chip away at their courses. Students maybe not having access to transportation or internet at home or wherever their residence is. Students coming in hungry, needing to eat. So some of those ways, some solutions that people shared were that they were offering loan out hotspots. Correct me if I got that wrong. We'd also do some laptop checkouts at quite a few of our sites so students can take the laptops home. At our program, we do offer free bus passes. We partner with the city bus service. And then we mentioned students coming in and just needing to eat, maybe because they just don't have time. And some sites have food pantries, and then some noodle soup offered on site. So we got cut off. I was curious as to how that works. Anybody else feel free to share if I missed anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so it sounds like some important networking collaborations with the city for the bus passes. And then also with the noodle soup to go. I don't know if that was a partnership with Cup of Noodle.
No, that was the foundation at our school finances that. So like the scholarship foundation.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't mention that the Efaw Center is an endowed center. And so, yeah, if you have a foundations officer, that is a really important partnership and yeah, and making the case for what they should be proposing to potential donors is a really important one, and having I think that data to back up why you're asking for what you're asking for can help to make that a compelling case, as well as the case study narratives.
And also at one of our campuses, it's very small, like community. And so we partner with the school district there, and they donate a ton of food to us that we offer to our students. Like their K through 12 school district.
Is that coming through? Do you know where that is? That food through their cafeteria, or?
I think so. I think it's like just leftover food from the cafeteria that just didn't get used up.
Yeah, that's awesome. Any other questions or comments for our first group? And thank you for sharing. Were there any questions that your group had that you wanted to pose to the larger group? Okay, so we'll shift to our room 2.
Maria, do you want to mention what you talked to me about in terms of the mental health?
Sure. So, oh, shoot. Actually, would you mind going over it? Because I'm blanking on what I said.
Oh, yeah. Well, we were just talking about, creative ways of engaging students and partnering. And Maria mentioned that at her school, there are certain faculty who actually give extra credit to students who come seeking mental health from counseling. The piece I talked about was a partnership between academic support and faculty, and really the whole institution. We instituted what we call an online student navigator program during the pandemic, just because everybody was thrust into the online world, both students and professors. And so for those faculty who wanted the help, and it wasn't about the content of their course, but supporting the students on the technical level, as well as connecting them with resources that they needed. And so several of us raised our hand and said, sure, we'll help. It was librarians, technical folks, I'm an analyst. And the program was successful, so we're continuing it even with classes that aren't necessarily all online, just because faculty have found it helpful to have the assistants and keep them focused on their content area. And students, sometimes are more comfortable reaching out to us for help in other areas. So that's been a really good partnership.
That's fantastic. Do you have, so as an analyst, I'm curious about the data that you are looking at to talk about the success, to like further make the appeal to continue this program?
Yeah, I don't know, we've kept statistics on, how many students, how many hours, how many classes. I'm not sure that we have done a full analysis, which I'm interested in terms of, has the student success and retention been greater in those classes that we've embedded the navigators in? So that would be our next step.
Yeah. Very cool. And I appreciate the incentivizing, accessing student counseling services. I think it's something that I've done for a while that I'm noticing more faculty doing as well, is offering students, I gave them 3 days that they can miss at no consequence to their attendance grade. And I called them mental health days, because I wanted to, again, destigmatize centering self-care and mental wellness. And that is something that I had students took advantage of that. And all they had to do was say, like, I'm taking one of my 3 days today, just send me an email, because I wanted to emphasize the communication component with their professors, like a professional behavior. But then I also said, like, you don't owe me any story or narrative. This is your day. You can take it whenever you want. And I encourage you to. And then I also modeled that for my students by saying, like, I always took one mental health day myself during the semester, and I plan ahead for it. So it wasn't disruptive to my syllabus, but I wanted to, have it be something that, like, we all do, we all need, not just, one population. Anything else from group 2? Any questions that you all had that you wanted to pose to our group, or any questions for group 2 or comments? Well, thank you also for sharing your wisdom. And then we'll go to our last group, group 3.
Hi, I'm Stephanie DeVingman from Parkland College. It went by really quick for us, and I am actually sick and not at my best, so I'm not sure I'm the best reporter, but so anybody else who wants to add for this can certainly add. One of the things that we talked about is that one of the challenges that we have is students knowing about what resources we have on campus, and then also actually using them. So people know about them sometimes, but don't access them. And so we talked about different strategies we do in order to try to connect students to them, such as doing a warm handoff, walking students to the different resources, things like that. But if the other people of the group can add their input, I would appreciate it.
Hi, Steph. Yeah, it was pretty much spot on. I was going to say the same thing, that we found that a commonality between all of our roles within our institutions was that we all offer these resources, within our departments, and that students may not know what we offer, or even if they do know what we offer, they kind of just don't want to take the time to stop in to access them. So we found that was a really common thing between all of us.
Thank you for sharing, Steph. Thanks for being here, despite your cold, and I hope that you can take some time to yourself soon. Yes, definitely. I experienced that as well with all of those events that I put on. I had pretty low attendance unless I partnered. So I'm trying to like strategically partner with like a class and see if a class will, again, going back to incentivize coming to the events, and then creating events that are specifically related to the course material. And I've had, mixed results with that. I'm also trying to reach out to registered student organizations and recruit them to come to the events. And I also, let's see, with the content area tests, I was able to use some of my budget to purchase practice vouchers. And so that's my next kind of experiment. We'll see how it goes. So because I created these learning communities last semester for students to come and study together for this test, but then students weren't coming. A part of that was when they were scheduled. So I'm having them happen after school gets out at 3:30, because a lot of them are in their clinical in K through 12 school during the day. So I've talked to the advisors to get a sense of like, okay, what are their schedules? When are they available? I'm going to make them hybrid, so you can attend either online or in person. And also, I'm going to have vouchers available. So you could take this practice test for free, where typically you'd have to pay $30 for it. And then that's what I'm going to advertise the learning communities and the online modules that connect to the content test. And so I'm thinking about multiple points of entry, multiple points of access, and then also mitigating any financial barrier. So we'll see how that goes. But yes, we're, folks are very busy and have very busy lives. And so that, that resonates with me of like trying to figure out, who is our audience, what are their needs, and what's going to get them to show up. I have also found really that the faculty referrals have been really great. And then also when students are in a position where their progress through being able to continue on is in jeopardy, then when somebody connects them with the Efaw Center, and I say, hey, we have all these resources and I can be an advocate for you, then they're showing up. And so that's also shifting my attention to working with the advisors to do some direct marketing to students who have gotten a D or an F or have withdrawn from a class or have gotten an incomplete in a class. And then I'm going to design specific programming for them in partnerships with other groups on campus that have also done have designed workshops for students who are on academic probation, to see if I can meet students in that place as well. So I just wanted to share this last slide that has some references and resources. So this Academos is a resource that's mentioned in this report and it's a software, it's a site, like it's an organization that you would contract with. But it was mentioned that some universities and community colleges have partnered with Academos to get students lower prices on their textbooks. And then also this is the Chronicle of Higher Education report that I've been referencing throughout this presentation. Well, thank you so much, Amy and Brittany, for inviting me to be a part of this learning community today. I really appreciate all of your thinking together and your participation. And I just, wish you the best out there in doing this really important work for your students.
And Becky, we want to thank you for taking time out of your day and your schedule to come and talk and facilitate conversation with everyone. I think you've definitely got some wheels turning, and I have a feeling that the conversation will continue as they go back to their institutions and go back about their days. Dina, do you have any closing comments or reminders or anything that you'd like to share before we leave?
I would only just say that, yes, as Amy mentioned at the beginning, some of our upcoming learning renewal events are kind of getting shifted. So you'll look for an email from me with those changes. For those of you who have participated in our trauma series, we're wrapping that up this month as well. So we'll have another opportunity. So all of that will be coming out. If you don't see it, please reach out to me. And just thank you, Becky, so much for being with us. I agree with Brittany that I feel like it planted a lot of really good seeds for continuing conversation about some really important work that's taking place. So Amy and Brittany, thank you for working so hard to organize this and bringing Becky into this conversation. And thank you all for attending and sharing, because that's how these types of conversations have their best effect, is by you all being here as well. So we really appreciate it.
And yes, thank you, Dina. Thank you, Becky, for your time today. Thank you to all of you who contributed. It was a really great conversation, and I think we all are walking away with something which is fantastic. For those of you who are involved with Learning Renewal and that particular project, there is a quarterly reflection next week. So please be sure to look for that. The email went out actually from Dina just this morning, or I got it just this morning because my email's being weird, but I think it just went out this morning. Just a reminder that we'll be meeting next Thursday and just coming in. And that's really a time for that particular grant to talk about what they're doing, what are those challenges, what are those successes, what do they need help with? The state's there to listen and to help and to guide. So if you have time, we'd love to see you. And with that, we'll give you about 15 minutes back to your day. Thank you all so very much.